Okay, let me start sharing. Uh, Madhukar, you can keep the debug point. I could show it to you, but it's not working in my Eclipse. I will yet try to show it to you. Remind me about this question towards the end of the session, okay? Okay. Uh, yeah. So, can you guys see my screen now? Okay, great. Okay. Let's begin with this. So let me give a recap of page object which we had discussed during the last meeting. So I'll just open the application which we had used last time. Is the Mercury tour. This is actually application which is for QTP, but we are using it for Selenium, so that's okay. So it has a simple registration form which we had used, and then we had discussed how we design the page object and what page object is. So what we had discussed was if we are writing our test and if we write every single method, that is typing in a text box or selecting a value from the drop down, then it is going to be laborious. Because if we have to use it in multiple test methods, then we have to repeat it again and again and again. So a better approach is we can have them abstracted out in some common class wherein it could be called from wherever it is needed. So this is what we had done. So what we had done was we had created a class called registration, which represents the registration page, and herein we were doing the operations. What kind of operations? Let us see that. Hi Manoj, hi everyone. Okay, so we have just begun with the session and we are doing a recap of page object. Okay, so this is the registration page wherein we have first name, last name, address, country and other fields. So if you see a registration class, in the registration class we have something called register new user method. In this method we were using the WebDriver methods for typing in a text box or selecting value from the drop down and other things. And whenever we needed to create a new user, we were just calling the register new user method from our test method, and in turn we were getting an account creation page object. So how it works is, as long as doing any operation keeps you on the same page, we do not return any new object. But as soon as we are navigated from one page to another, which happens when we click on the register button, we create a new page object. Okay. Okay. Can you guys confirm if you can see my screen? It seems that Shilpi cannot see my screen. If yes, as in yes, you can see or you cannot see. Okay, you guys can see. Shilpi, then I think there is some problem at your end. I'm not quite sure because others can see. Okay, great. So yeah, I was talking about the page object here. So I said that the basic fundamental is, while writing a page object, we write methods in such a manner that if a method brings control on a new page, then we return object of that page, otherwise we return the same page object. This is something which we had seen in the previous session. So this is the method register new user, which registers a new user. Now when we click on the register button here, which is available, the submit button here actually, which results in creation of new user, then we return a new object of type account creation page. Okay, so this is a different class. Okay, then I had said that we will see how we can optimize it more. So what I have done now is I have created a new registration class. I have named it registration new. So let us see the differences now what I have done here. Okay. Okay, so this is a registration new class. This doesn't do anything very different from the registration, but the difference here is we have further broken down the methods. So if you see the registration method, we had just one registration class. We had just one method called register new user, wherein everything was happening in that method. But what I have done in registration new class is I have further broken them down. So what I have here is I have methods say enter first name, enter last name, enter phone, enter user and other thing. Okay. So as I said that if you are doing some operation on a page which keeps control on the same page, in that case we return the object of the same type. So if you see the first method called enter first name, it takes argument first name, it types the first name in the first name field and it returns this object. This means here the same object, that is registration new. Okay, the same is applicable to enter last name, enter phone, because when you are doing these operations, your control is going to be on the same page. Control goes to the next page only when you click on the submit button. Is that clear? Okay, so this is the registration new class. This doesn't do anything very different from the registration, but the difference here is we have further broken down the methods. So if you see the first method called register new user, which registers a new user, wherein everything was happening in that method. But what I have done in registration new class is I have further broken them down. So what I have here is I have methods say enter first name, enter last name, enter phone, enter user and other thing. Okay, so as I said that if you are doing some operation on a page which keeps control on the same page, in that case we return the object of the same type. So if you see the Okay, great. So if you see here, all of these methods are returning this object, which means the registration new object itself. It's only the last method, the second last method, which you have got here called click register, which is the object of type account creation page. Okay. So till here it is same as a registration class, but we have further broken down operations into smaller methods. So this makes it more clear. First thing. Second thing, if you have to do a different combination of tests, say you want to type in just first name and last name and want to check what errors appears, it makes it easy to simulate such scenarios. So I find it easy to break down the operations into different smaller methods. You may find other easy way of doing this as well. Okay. Now what I'm doing from register new user method is I'm just calling these other small methods. So what I do here is register new user still returns the account creation page, but what I'm doing here is I'm just calling those other methods. So I call enter first name. Don't worry about the argument, we'll come to it later. Then enter last name, then enter phone, then enter username. So what I'm doing here is I say enter first name, then dot, enter last name, dot, enter phone, enter username. So this makes it more comprehensible, isn't it? Does it? So if I compare it with the previous, register new user method, if you see here, it may not look very clear to someone who is not very used to programming when we are doing driver or find element or blah 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 blah. So it may not appear very clear to a non-technical user. But if you see the register new user method here, we have just enter first name, enter last name, enter phone and other things. So does it make it more comprehensible? Okay, say yes or no. Okay, great. Okay. Now let us come to the object part of it, which we did not see so far. So we have an object here being passed called registration data. We did not have any such object in our previous method. So let us see what this object is. So let me go to this object, which is another class. Yeah, so this is a class called registration data. Now what this class does is this class holds the data object here. Okay. So what all data we have, which we are passing to the form, they are first name, last name, phone number till confirmation password. So these are just the private instance variable here, and then we have getter setter methods here. So getter setter methods are nothing. Getter is the way to get the object here, and setter is to set its value. Okay, and then we have something else down which we'll see later, not now. Okay, now let's come back to our test. Yeah, WebDriver test. So this was the first method which we had seen last week, not last week, during last session, wherein we were calling the old register new user. Okay, this was the old register new user. Now what we have done here is we have modified it a little. What we are trying to do here is we have broken down the page methods in the page object, one thing. Second, we are also trying to do the data-driven testing. Now let us see what we are doing with data-driven testing. So as we remember from our discussion on the TestNG class, we have mechanism for data-driven testing from TestNG. Now let us see how that works. So if I go back to the registration data class here, in this class I have got a method called getRegistrationData, right? So this method returns an argument of two-dimensional object array. Okay. Now for TestNG, to understand that this is a data provider method, we need to annotate it with annotation data provider. Okay, and we need to give it a name. So this name should be unique within class. So its name is rich data. Okay, and this method is returning us the values which could be used by the form. What are these values? This is just the test data. So I have got two sets of values here. One set of value has first name 1, last name 1 and other thing, and second set of values have first name 2, last name 2 and so on. Is that clear? No doubt so far? Okay, great. Okay, great. Okay. So this is our data provider method. Now let us go back to the test. Yeah. So when we come to the second set of test here, what we have to do here is we have to let our test method know where the data is coming from. Okay. So in that case, we have to specify the data provider in our test annotation. So when we say here add test, we have to say data provider, and we have to give it, we have to pass the name of the data provider. So if you see the registration data, we have given it name rich data. So this is the same name which we are going to use here. So we'll say rich data. Okay. And we have to let it know which class it comes from. So we have to specify the data class. So we say data provider class equal to that class. Which class? The class name is registration data. Is that clear? Okay. Okay. Now what we have to do is we have to collect all of these arguments which are being provided by the registration data class in this method. Okay. So what are those arguments? So there are total 8 arguments here. If I have counted them right, yeah, there are total 8 arguments here. So these all arguments will be collected by your test method. These arguments are provided by get registration data method in the registration data class. Okay. So let us see the test method here. Yeah. So here comes the test method. So how do we collect those arguments? We have to have all these arguments specified here in the test method. Okay. So we have got a string first name, last name till confirm password. So remember the order here. First, we have got first name here in the get registration data method. So it will be passed to first name argument in the test method. Okay. So whichever comes in which order would be considered here. First name will come here. The similar way last name will come here. Phone number will come here, and so on. We will get the confirm password. Is that clear? Okay, great. Now, as I said earlier, we have two set of values here, right? So we have first name 1, last name 1, and so on, and first name 2, last name 2, and so on. So there are two sets of values. So when we execute this test, we will see that test is executed twice, okay? Because there are two different set of values. So if I come here, yeah, when we execute it, we will see the execution happens twice. But before that, how we use this data now? Okay, so let us go back to our registration data class. So we saw that in registration data class, we have declared these instance variables, right? So these instance variables have getter in certain methods. So these methods could be used to assign the values to these instance variable. So this is something which we are doing from the test method. So if I go back to the test method now, yeah. So what I'm doing here is I have declared an object of registration data class, and then I'm setting all these values. Now where are these values coming from? These values are being passed from the method. Where does this method test registration new get these values from? The method is getting these values from get registration data method in the registration data class. Okay, so here is the registration data object, and then we are setting all these values here. Okay, is that clear? Okay, okay. Now what we will do is we will pass this object to our method called registration register new user. So let's go back to this method again, which we had seen earlier. So this is that object which is being passed here, right? The advantage of this approach is we don't have to pass 8 or 9 or 10 number of arguments here. You may as well have form which has say some 20 arguments. So you cannot keep passing all those values in one chunk of method. It becomes very laborious and difficult to maintain. So if you have a data object built around your form, it makes it easy. So you can just pass the object here. When you pass the object, whatever value you need, you can query those values using the object. For example, when I want to type enter first name, what I need the first name. So I'll query this object now. I'll say registration data got get first name. So this is a getter method which we have got in the registration data class, which gets us the first name. The similar way I can get the other values. The other values are, for example, when I want to type the last name, I say enter last name. What is the last name? I say registration data, get me the last name. The same way, enter phone and other things, still enter confirm password. And at last, I say click register. So what click register does? Click register submits the form and gets me to the account creation page. This is the reason why we are returning the account creation page object from register new user. Is that clear? Okay, great. Okay, this was simple. Okay, so let me try to execute it now. Okay, rest of the test is same. There's not much difference. We get the URL. We say register new user. We pass the registration data object. We assert that registration was successful, and that's all. So let me try to execute it and see. So we will see that registration happens twice this time because we have two sets of registration values. Okay, so let me execute it. I'll just right click and say run as TestNG. Yeah. So it should bring up Firefox now. Okay, so it is typing in those values, it submits them, it's over. This was first set. Now it would exercise second set of values. So here we have got first name 2, last name 2 and other thing, and this is second set of values. So if you see the result here, yeah, in the TestNG Eclipse plugin, we can see those two sets of values for which data was passed. Okay, this makes it easy to debug in case we have failures in the test. Okay, we can also see this in the TestNG report. Let me just refresh the project. Yeah, and test output is the folder where we should look into. Index.html is the file. It's coming up. Okay. Okay. Okay, so this how the test report in TestNG looks like. Herein we have got all those set of values which were passed in for test registration new method. It considers them as two iterations because the test was executed twice. This is one kind of report we have with TestNG. We also have something called emailable report, which you may like to use with your CI system if you have one. Yeah, so this is the emailable report. So this again has got all those parameters which we had passed here. Okay, is that clear? It's not clear? Not followed. Okay, say yes or no. Am I audible? Okay, great. Okay. Okay, now we also have support for something called optional arguments. So we can also have say one more argument here, yeah, which we can mark as optional, and I can say I can assign some value to it, not this, and I can say string say 10. Okay, now if you see here our method test get test data, what was its name, let me just see. Yeah, get registration data, it returns only 8 arguments. But if we want to set up some other value also, then we can define one optional argument here. Okay, so we can say temp, and I can give it a name called temp. Okay, this could be a value you may like to use in your test. In that case it works. Okay, but for example, if we don't do this, let me first execute this and show this test still works. Okay, let me just execute it. Okay, I think I missed something. I'm sorry, I think we cannot give optional argument here. In case of data provider, we cannot give optional argument. I was wrong here. No, that's not the reason, Kit. We cannot give optional argument here. I was wrong. Yeah, that's not the way you can give an optional argument. Optional argument is something you can give when you are, say for example, I was running test from within Eclipse here, right? So if you see my cell test case class, so I have given optional argument as Firefox here while launching the browser. So every time we see the Firefox coming up, that is something which is coming because of this optional argument. So we cannot give optional argument in case of data provider. I was wrong there. Okay. Okay. So that was about the data provider. Let me just show you the package structure also. This might make it more clear for you. So that's the project. This is our source folder which contains the source file. So I have got a package here called com.selenium.data object which has the registration data class, yeah, which we saw here. Do we create multiple data provider? Vishal, I'll just come to this question. Let me just explain the package structure. Okay, so herein we have the data object package which contains the registration data class. Then we have the page object package which contains the registration new class which we saw, which we used to create the registration. And then we have the test class wherein we have the WebDriver test which has got test, and cell test case class which has got the initiation of the browser. Okay. Now coming to the Vishal's question, do we create multiple data provider? What do you mean by that, Vishal, multiple data provider? Are you referring to me using these two sets here, are you referring to this as multiple data provider, one set this and one set this? Are you referring to this? Am I audible? Okay, see, if you're referring to this, it entirely boils down to your requirement, okay? So you may not have requirement to even do such kind of testing. This is needed more in case of you want to test with different set of data values. In that case, you do all this. You can definitely use data provider in two different test annotation. There's no problem with that. So if you see here, I have two methods. Here I have two methods. So I could have used data provider here as well, which we did not have. So I have used data provider only here. So there's no problem in using data provider with multiple test methods. Does that answer your question, Madhukar? Rich data 1 and rich data 2. Okay. So why would you like to create rich data 1 and rich data 2? If you are passing the same number of arguments and the method which takes this data does the same job, then you will keep them in one data provider. But now if you have different sort of requirement, for example, let us consider the sign-in page. Okay. So the sign-in page here in this demo site, it has only username and password. Now you may like to create a different data provider. So that is something which you could do like this. So I'll just copy this stuff and I'll cut it down to just two arguments. Okay. So I'm going to name this as login data. Okay. And I'll name this method as get login data. Okay. And in that case, I'll get only two parameters, which are username and password. I'm going to remove all of the parameters. Okay. Okay. And let it be first name 1, and this is your password 1, and this could be a password 2. Okay. Now, if you want to do data-driven testing for different username and password for login, in that case, you can use this login data data provider. Okay. But you will have to also change your logic here. You will also have to write another page object which takes only the username and password and does the operation. Okay. Is that clear? Or should I create the method and show? Do you want me to create method and show? Okay, let's take Jatin's question. He's asking, can we use CSV? Yes, Jatin, definitely we can use CSV file. So instead of hard coding data here, we could have used the CSV file. This is one topic I will cover in the future session. So we really don't have to hard code the data here. Jatin brought in a good point. What we can do here is we can externalize these values to a CSV file. We can fetch it from there. We can feed it to our registration data class. In turn, this would be used by our test method. So we can do that. Any other question about data provider? Okay. Let's move on to next topic now, which is about executing JavaScript from within WebDriver. So why do we need JavaScript execution? First thing, we should never use JavaScript execution unless the WebDriver methods do not work. So when we are typing in a text box, we should use send keys method like this, what we are using here. Yeah, the send key method here, like this, because this is something which emulates real user behavior. When you are executing JavaScript, it is not that a user is going to execute JavaScript for sake of entering value in a text box, but then you may come across instances wherein these methods do not work. A very common simple example of this I have seen is mouse over. When you mouse over your cursor to some link, and then you see that a kind of drop down appears, and in that drop down you have multiple link options. So this is something which I see do not work at times in case of WebDriver. Now in that case, if you're trying to do it using WebDriver, you may encounter exception like element is not visible, because until unless you bring mouse to an element, only after that you have drop down menu sort of thing coming up with more options. Okay, in that case JavaScript execution might come handy. So let us see how we can execute JavaScript from within WebDriver. But before going there, let us try to understand something about document object model. Okay, so let us come back to our registration form. Okay, so in this HTML page, we can use a mechanism called DOM, also known as document object model, to navigate through all of these elements. Okay, so these all elements are part of a big pan known as DOM, which has got methods to bring control on these elements, and then we can set their properties. How do we do that? We can see it working in Chrome's console. So just hit the F12 key. Yes, Manjunath, I think I answered this question. It's very similar to using CSV file to read the data values. You can as well use the Excel sheet using POI. Yeah, that's right. Okay, coming back to the JavaScript execution. So I have brought in Chrome console here. Just hit the F12 key if you have it handy with you, if you are doing practice also with me, and then hit the escape key. So it will bring the JavaScript executor here. So just hit a Control L, it will clear everything else. Now let us execute some DOM here. How we write DOM here is we say document. So if you see here, Chrome console has started suggesting me as soon as I type in document. So ENT is there. I'll just take that dot. So I'll use a method called get elements by name. Now why am I using that method? Let us see once. Let us see the HTML of first name here. Okay. Yeah. So if you see this, the first name has got name attribute as first name. Do you guys see that? Okay, so I'm going to use this to set the values in the first name. Okay. Okay, so I'll say get elements by name. Okay, so this is a method available in the DOM. Okay, and then we need to pass it the name here. So name is the first name. Okay, let's pass the question towards the end of this session. Otherwise, we'll leave the continuity. I'll take all of the question. Please bear with me. Okay, so I have typed in first name argument here and hit enter. Okay, so what happens here is we get an array of elements whose name begins with first name, which we passed on here. Okay, if you pay attention to the name of the method here, it is get elements by name. This is plural. So this indicates that we are going to get the multiple values here. And if you also see what is being returned here, it is in the brackets, and this bracket denotes the array. Okay, now we cannot set values on array directly. We have to pick up specific elements, and we know for sure that here we have only one element with the name first name. So how we can get the only this element? Can anyone tell me how I can get only this element? It's getting me array at this point. I want to get only one element. Okay. Yes, Kitty, you are very close to it, but instead of 1, I'll use 0 here. That's all. So yeah, that was very close to right answer. Okay, so if you see here, the syntax is changed now. There are no brackets now. So this is the element which I am getting here. Now, if I want to set its value, what I will do is I will use the property value over this text element. Okay, so I'll say dot value equal to okay, say Selenium. So this is the value. So do you guys see that first name text box has got the value Selenium set? Okay. Now let us do this operation from WebDriver. Okay. Okay. So I have got another method here. Yeah. This is test JavaScript execution. So what I am doing here is I open the URL and then I execute the script. Now how I execute these scripts? So what we have to do is we have to take the driver object and then we have to cast it in JavaScript executor object. Okay. We had seen this portion while learning Java, how to do casting. So what we do, we take the driver object, in front of it in parentheses we keep the JavaScript executor and then we close the parentheses. It means that this driver object has been cast into JavaScript executor, and then we can invoke the methods of JavaScript executor over it. So one of the method is the execute script here, which lets us execute the JavaScript. So what we pass to this execute script method is the same DOM which we have written earlier. Okay, so that is document dot get elements by name, first name, zeroth value in the array, zeroth element in the array, and I'll change name as Selenium. Okay. Okay, and then I have got one thread.sleep. Never used thread.sleep. I have used it here to pause the execution for some time so that we could see that Selenium is being passed. Okay, so let me execute this. Yeah, here comes the browser, and it types Selenium. It stays for some time because I used thread.sleep. So I think everyone could see that Selenium was typed in there. So did you guys see that Selenium was there? Okay, great. So as I said earlier, do not use this way to type in a text box or make the drop down selection, because this is not how a real user does the operation. For that sake, we have to use the methods provided by the WebDriver. But when you come across the ways when WebDriver methods do not work, for example, the mouse over issue which I explained, in that case you could use it. Okay. To reiterate it, how we executed JavaScript, we need to first wrap the driver object into the JavaScript executor object, and then we can call the execute script method. Is that clear? Okay. 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 Now let us take the question. So there was one question. 2D array object. Okay, so Vishal had asked, in case of data provider which we discussed, do we need 2D array object? Yes, Vishal, this is how TestNG's data provider works. This always returns a two-dimensional array object. So the answer of that is yes. Okay, any other question? Okay, I think this session is going to be the smallest one. Shall we start the execution from middle? Shall we start the execution from middle? I'm not quite, okay, sure, explain it. Okay, enter the details of the... Kitty, if you are using... No, if you are filling the registration data, if you are doing a test on the registration entry form, then you will have to bring control there. You can not do it from somewhere else. You cannot, so I cannot say, for example, if the scenario is the do registration and then login, so I cannot just do the login part. I have to execute the entire thing. I have to do the registration and then I have to log in. Does that answer your question? For the purpose of debugging also you cannot do this. The reason is you have to set up the entire environment here. For example, if you see the test registration new, you cannot execute it from here. You have to have the driver being instantiated, you have to have the registration data object being created, and then only you could register the new user. You cannot execute only part of code here. That's what I'm referring to, because entire setup has to take place. Okay, for example, consider this, you want to execute it only from here. Okay, say from registration.register new user. Now you cannot do this. The reason for this is, if you want to execute from here, how does your code know that what is registration? How does your code know what is registration data? So you cannot do this. Okay. Okay, great. Any other question? In case of JavaScript is disabled in the browser. I do not think social Pete will work. JavaScript should be enabled. Yeah, Madhukar, I remember your question. I'll take it when there are no questions at all, okay? Yeah. Can we define on different classes and run it? Manju, can you explain your question once again? What do you mean by cannot be defined on different classes and run it? You mean to say that instead of just this one WebDriver test, create a new test? No, your question is not very clear. Avinash is asking, can we set dependency among tests? Yeah, definitely we can do that. So let me give you an example here. We have this test registration method, and then we have this test registration new. So I can give dependency here. I can say depends on method, and I can give the method name here. Okay. So the method name is test registration. Okay. So now if I execute it, let me execute this and see what happens. Yeah, Manju, hang on a second. Yeah, let me execute this method now, which has dependency on first method. So let us see how it goes. Okay, so this is first time, which is the first method which is executed here. Okay, okay. Then we have second method execution happening with the first data set, and then we have second method execution happening again with the second data set. This all happened because in the second method we added one attribute to the test annotation, that is depends on method, and we gave the method name here. So if you see the result set here, we have test registration and then we have test registration new. There is one more thing to notice here, that we can also say that even if the test method on which our test method depends on fails, even in that case our other test method should be run. For example, if I make this method fail deliberately, I say here, say I'll make it fail, okay? I'll make it 1, 2, 3. So this method is going to fail now. Now if we execute test registration new, yeah. So this is the first method which is being executed, and it would fail because we have added some string which is not available. Okay. Now if you see here, the first method has failed. This is in red color, right? And the second method is skipped. It is not failed. It's skipped because the method which it is dependent on has not succeeded. So until unless that succeeds, this method will not be executed. This is one excellent feature of TestNG here. We can also do one thing. We can make it always run irrespective of whether the method fails or not. This helps us in defining kind of order in the test. Okay, so we can say here always run equal to true. No, it's not coming. Okay, there is something wrong here. Yeah, always run equal to true. So if I do this, in that case, even if the first method fails, second method would be executed. Okay, let us see this. So this is the first method. Okay, and you see it has failed, but it's still going to execute the second method. You see the browser comes up for second method, executing test with first data set, and then second method being executed again with the second data set. Yeah. So these are a couple of use cases of depends on method here. Okay. You can we can also give the depends on method with the group name. For example, I have given here the method name, right? Instead of this, I can also give the group name. So I can say depends on group. Okay, and then I can give it a group name. I can say here rich test. And what we can do is we can have couple of tests grouped as rich test. So I can say here, sorry, not here. Yeah, so I can name it as rich test. Yeah, this is the same thing. But the advantage here is what we can do is we can have a number of methods grouped with this group name. In that case, all the methods which are grouped with this group name will be executed before test registration new method is executed. So does that answer your question, Avinash? Okay, I think it does. Okay. Okay, Manju, coming back to your question, I don't think that that could be achieved creating different classes, different part of code. I don't think, see, we will have to execute the entire method. We cannot execute method from middle somewhere, so that's for sure. Instead of JavaScript executor. How will you do that, Jatin? I'm not quite sure what you're referring to using XPath or CSS to handle the mouse over. Because they are just the location strategies. If you have a look at registration class or registration new class for that matter, what we are doing here is we are using these location strategy. That is, we are using name everywhere. We could have used XPath or CSS selector also, but I don't think that would have solved the issue with respect to mouse over. Okay. Okay. So Madhukar, coming back to your question about the debugging, so I'll try to show it to you, but my Eclipse hangs, but I'll show you how you can do it. So I'll come back to the test here. Okay. So consider you want to check whether the email address which is being set is right or not. Okay. So what you do is you just double click here towards left hand side. So you will see one blue symbol coming up. Okay. And then what you do, you right click on your method and then you say debug as. Okay. So far we are doing run as, instead of that we do debug as. And when you say TestNG test, in that case it will begin the execution, but it will pause the execution as soon as it reaches this line. Okay. And then you can see the value of your variable here. Okay. And then you will have to manually click the run button to make it proceed for the test execution. So if I do this here, which I'm afraid my Eclipse will not work, but I'll try this. Debug TestNG. So it comes here. Oh great, it's working. Okay. Okay, so it comes here. Something went wrong. Okay, wait. I did not consider this debug point. Let me take it to our test method. Let me take it to our test method, okay? I'll take it to, okay. Okay, since we had dependency here, everything is being executed, so let me just remove this dependency to make it simple. And this always run is also not needed, okay? So let us take our debug point here, say for example, yeah, you want to check whether enter mail types in the right email address or not. So you want to debug that, imagining that there was certain error. Looks like I'm entering email twice. Let me remove one of the value. Okay. Okay. So let me put debug point here and let me try to execute the test again. Okay. No, we cannot try run as. Run as we'll just run it. Debug. If you want to debug, we'll have to debug it. It's a problem with my Eclipse. It's not taking it somehow. No, it's not taking it. Okay, great. It has opened. So if you have a look at my Eclipse, Madhukar, it gives me a prompt that do I want to switch to debug perspective? Do you see that? Okay, I'm not quite sure if Madhukar is even there. Here ask this question. Okay, I will open the debug point, debug perspective here. So this is the debug perspective. Okay, so this is where our test has stopped. So if we keep control here, we can as well see the values. So we want to check what email address is being passed. So what we can do is we can select this statement which gets us the email address, that is registration data.email, and just say the inspect, or you can use the shortcut also. Okay, that is Control-Shift-I. So say the inspect here. Okay, so it gives us the value. So the value is test1@selenium.com. So this is how we can debug. So if we know that, okay, this is the right value, let's continue with the test. So what I will do is I will just say continue here. Okay, so where is my execution part gone? Okay. Yeah, so this is the run here, so I'll have to resume it again. Okay, yeah, so this is how it works. Okay, great. So this is how we can debug. I'll come back to the Java perspective here. It makes it difficult to understand. Okay, again doing the debug. We have two data sets for run. I'll again continue here. So every time it comes to execution and it comes to this point where we have the debug point, it will halt the execution. We'll have to check the values. We'll have to continue the execution, and that's all. Okay, let's open the Java perspective again. Yeah, so Madhukar, yeah, that was about to debug. Okay, great. Okay, any other question? Yes, Deepak, you can use Perl as well. I think your question is, can we use Perl for programming? Yeah, we can definitely use. I think Perl is supported officially. I think it is supported officially. I guess so, it is supported. I'm not very sure of that. Okay. Can we specify in particular test the transaction start and end time? Yes, you can do that, Jatin. What you will have to do is, I think these questions are coming from QDB, right? Isn't it? In QDB you have all these features, but definitely we can use these features in Selenium as well, because Java gives us great flexibility. So say for example, what I can do here is, let me use the first method. It executes only once, it will save us time. So what I'll do here is, I can take a calendar class here. Manoj, we can do that in case of TestNG, but see, consider if you want to see the execution from within a statement, so TestNG doesn't support that, okay? Yeah, so TestNG will give you entire method execution time, but if you want to see from between some statements, then that is not something you can use TestNG for. Okay, so I can use a calendar class here. So this is I will have to use the Gregorian calendar. This is a class in Java which supports lots of calendar related things. So I can just say get time. Yeah, so I can take one time here, and then I can take one time towards the execution of, towards the end of the method, and I can print these to find out how much time my method takes. Or if you want to have only for certain statements, then you can have it available only within those statements. Okay. Yes, Manoj, that's what I was referring to, that TestNG will give for the entire method, but if you want to take time only for certain statements, then that's not going to help you. Okay, I don't know, Deepak, about that question. Maybe you would have to update your version because it's not crashing for me. Yeah. Okay. Any other question, guys? I think it is latest. Actually, I never bother to check because it always works for me. So you guys can see my screen. It never crashes for me. Okay. Don't use IE. It's a sin to use IE. Okay. Don't use IE. Until unless you are asked to test, don't use IE. Yeah, sure. I'll repeat what I had said about the page object model. So what I had said was, page object model, sorry, not page object model. Someone asked me about, oh yeah, sorry, page object model. Okay. So what I said about the page object model was, we use page object model because we cannot have the operations being carried out on the page is scattered in all over your test. For example, if you see here, I have 3 test methods here, which are essentially doing the same thing but in a different way. So what I have done here is, I have taken all those common methods in one class called registration new here. Okay. In the registration new method, I have created different small methods here for doing different small operations. In these methods, if a method does certain operation which keeps control on the same page, then I return the object of that type itself. For example, when I do enter first name, I return the object this here because control remains on the registration page itself. But if I do certain operation which brings control on a new page, in that case I return the object of that page. For example, when I submit the registration form, I am directed to account creation page, so I named it as account creation page, and then I am returning the object of account creation page here. Okay. The advantage of this approach is I can just use these methods anywhere I need to exercise these form elements. As well as if I want to pass all the data to the form and submit the form, then I can use all those values here. So I have just one place wherein all these values are available, and this makes maintenance far easier. Is that clear? Okay. Nothing is shared. No, everything is shared. Can you guys see my screen? You must be able to. Okay. Okay. Any more questions? Okay. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll bundle this project and upload it in the site seleniumtest.com. Yeah, I'll do that. You guys could download it from there. Okay. 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 That's all. Yeah. Okay. Welcome. Let's end this session then. I'll keep you guys posted on next meeting. We'll have to see lots of things. Good night. Bye bye. I think this was the shortest meeting ever. Okay, sure. Bye. Good night.